Good morning, everyone. I got to tell you, the best part of my Sunday when I'm up here speaking is listening to your music. It just moves me. Really cool stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Namaste, everyone. So good to see you all. So good to be back here today. So the other day, about 2 weeks ago, I asked Bonnie, I said, what's the theme for this month? And if you haven't figured it out by now, it's peace, poise, and power. So I started thinking, gosh, what am I going to talk about? And so I watched her on the YouTube video and got some great ideas. And then I watched Larry's version of everything last week, which was fantastic. I learned more about Rosh Hashanah it was just amazing. Absolutely loved it. And I figured if he could take a little bit of liberty with the theme, I might be able to as well. So I was thinking about the logical order of the 3 Ps for me. And for me, it started with poise. And so Ernest Holmes says that poise is the perfect mental balance which maintains everything in its proper place. It's the law of equilibrium without which nothing could be maintained. Holmes then describes peace as a state of inner calmness, complete, that nothing can disturb it. So complete, nothing can disturb it. And with the realization of our oneness with spirit, this brings about a peace which is accompanied by a consciousness of power. So I see it for me personally as poise, then peace, then power. Holmes says that our creative power is marvelous. For every time that we think, we set the law of mind in motion. He says this should give us all a full sense of freedom and the realization that there is no competition or monopoly. He goes on to say that it leaves each of us to work out our own salvation as we use this infinite energy from the universe into the degree and the power that we choose to use it, that it's our choice. Again, I know it's not so much fun, but all the responsibilities put right back on us. So there we have it, poise, peace, and power. So I started thinking, I was telling Larry before we started what I was going to talk about. And I said, well, somebody go out to the bookstore and get me some poise and peace and power. Or maybe it's in the kitchen. Just go grab some, because I could always use a little extra. So if we need more of that, or if we desire more of that, we need to manifest it. So if we're going to manifest things, I immediately just go back to how I manifest anything and everything. And I think about visioning, or I think about affirmations and things like that. But then it usually comes back to forgiveness. And I think about those things. So I don't think we could have the 3 P words today without a good F word in there. And it's forgiveness. You got to have forgiveness. For me, if I'm not manifesting, I need to either start forgiving myself or anybody else for all these perceived transgressions. So then I heard Bonnie say in her talk a couple of weeks ago to look at this next month's Science of Mind, the October version that she just referenced a few minutes ago. There's a few things in there on peace and power and poise, but there were no fewer than 17 references for forgiveness, and probably a dozen of radical forgiveness. And so that's what I would like to focus on today. So if we want more of that, more peace, more power, more poise, those things, how are we going to bring this about? A few years ago, I took a class at Unity down in El Paso. In fact, I took it twice over a different couple of years, and it was the 4T class by Stretton Smith, the tithing of your time, talent, and treasure. And it was about, I thought it was about abundance and prosperity. It was about so much more. But the first thing that they taught us in the class was forgiveness. They made us make a list of forgiving ourselves first, and then forgiving anybody that we thought of these perceived transgressions. And I think it does that in the good book, Forgive Us Our Trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. So that was one reference that I had in my past, and something to learn and look at that helped out quite a bit. First of all, forgiving yourself and then other people. Then I took another class, and it was in here a few years ago, and I took another one up at Wellspring. It was with my brother RJ, which he sends his greetings, and please keep him in your prayers. I think he had a gallbladder surgery this week or something, so send him good energy. But he taught me so much about radical forgiveness. He taught about it. There are a couple of things that he went over is that when we talk about forgiveness, we take back the power that we've given to the world to do us harm. We release ourselves and the one who hurt us from the prison of our resentment, and we free ourselves to live in the eternal now without holding on to the past. And the last thing was we acknowledge the Christ perfection within ourselves and whoever we believe to be that offender. Let me see if I can. Does that help, Skip? No. These come down? All right. How's that? Is that better? There we go. So I think that these miscommunications, that often leads to judgment and leads to things where we get upset, resentment, things like that, where we get upset with folks and we start to think about forgiveness. I think we need to communicate and care enough to confront, but we separate the confrontation from the person. You know, we've all heard judge the behavior, but not the person. When we do this, or if you said something like, when you do this, I feel this. I think that's fair communication. I think most doctors would teach us that, and counselors and things. But one thing I was taught by my ex-wife many years ago was never invalidate somebody's feelings, especially hers. But it's so true, because feelings aren't right or wrong, they just are. And so listening, acknowledging, that was a great lesson for me. Another great forgiveness reframe I learned from RJ in this class was, let me read this to you. It says, even though I may not understand it all, I now realize that you and I have been receiving exactly what we each had subconsciously chosen, and we're doing a dance with and for each other to bring about a state of awakened consciousness. I thought that was really interesting. It said, remember that people are playing a role in our development, even when it appears that they're hurting or harming us. And so I can go back to dozens of examples of thinking about that. I was a sales manager in Fresno, California about 20 years ago. It was my first job being a sales manager, and I worked 9 months straight, 6 days a week, 16 hours a day, cleaning up this TV station and putting everything in order for their sales and marketing. And we had done so well that following year, after everything was put into order, that we exceeded all of our goals. I got a huge incentives check. It was fantastic. My boss was promoted. They moved him to Dallas. But then the company decided that they would put this guy that used to be in charge of the station, just let him still be in charge, but from San Francisco. And one of the reasons that he was no longer there is because he was real mean to everybody. And it wasn't very nice. I never had to work with the guy, but the guy made my world a living, you know what. It was not fun. I hated it. He made everybody's life miserable. And so I was going through all this. It was probably about 4 months of it. And my mom reminded me, she said, Rambo, stay in your power. Stay peaceful, stay poised, and stay in your power. Remember who you are, what you are, and how you were raised, she would tell me. And I was afraid to say anything or do anything because I just received this massive, I don't want to call it a bonus check, it was an incentive check. And I said, my goodness, you know, I was really kind of hooked into that. And I finally relaxed. I remember the trapeze metaphor, you know, are you really living when you're hanging on, or are you living when you let go and you fly through the air? But you do have to let go to get to the next one. So I called my boss, the senior vice president of the company, thanked him so much. I said, I enjoy what I do. I've enjoyed doing it for you all, and it's time for me to move on now, and here's my resignation. And he refused to accept it. And he said, what do you need? And I said, well, I want to be the general manager, and I just want to report to you, and that's it. And if you could, he said, anything else? I said, if you could make it where this guy could never come into the city of Fresno city limits, that'd be great. He said, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. And he called me back in 5 minutes. He said, congratulations, you're the new general manager. And, you know, yeah, I thought that would have been great. I even got a raise and all these different things that I didn't ask for. But that wasn't the real lesson. The true beauty, the great thing that came about afterwards was, remember what I said a minute ago, that people play a role in your life for your development. I finally had to get, because I was still so upset with this guy. I mean, I wasn't sleeping well. And I finally had to start to forgive him. And I had to hallucinate. I had to make up the idea that he was playing a role of being the bad guy in my life so that I could learn this lesson. And once I made that NLP reframe, that shift, and I was able to thank him. And every time I think about him, from 20 years ago till this morning, every time I think about him, I bless him and send him fantastic energy. And my experience in Fresno wasn't good. It was phenomenal. My career there was extraordinary. But I had to get to the point where I could forgive this guy in my own ignorance of the role that he played, and it turned out to be beautiful. So I was very grateful for that. Reminds me of another time. You think I would have learned that lesson really well. A few years later, I'm back home, and I'm running Channel 4 down in El Paso. This company that I used to compete against in Fresno bought that TV station. And they said, okay, you're going to be the new general manager. And I said, great. Well, there was a lot of folks there that had been with the old company. They had their previous jobs and titles, and a lot of that stuff was changed. People don't like change. And there was one person in particular that I had really given my power to. And this person was just making life really difficult for myself and other folks. Had more invested in my failure than in the success of the company. And anytime you get between me and feeding my kids, you're on the wrong side of the argument. I mean, I was just really angry. But as an enlightened spiritual person, you think that I would have handled things differently, and especially going through those other lessons. But I had to think about it for a while. And I was listening to some tapes by Chris Chenoweth, again on forgiveness. And I realized that, and I think I talked about this the last month when I was here, I don't like to use the word sin a whole lot unless it's used and the way Bonnie likes to use it as well, is missing the mark. To me, sin was wanting something for me that I didn't want for you or anybody else, whether it's the last piece of pie or prosperity or abundance, whatever. That's how I looked at it. And then I had to think that I didn't want anything for me that I wouldn't want for this other person. And when I really got that through my head, that was a true gift. And I said, well, then you do that, Bram. And I was driving to work one day, and I was saying all these wonderful things for me. And I said, I'm going to say it for them as well. And I'd been through about 11 months of not so much fun. And not within 5 minutes of getting into the office that morning, this person came walking in and said, you know what? I'd like to take an early retirement and spend more time with my spouse. Would you mind if I just leave? If you want me to train somebody, I will. And I said, God bless you. Don't let the door hit you in the butt. Let's go. And thank you, God. It couldn't have worked out any better. Worked out great for them. Worked out great, for me and the rest of the staff. But, I was just so shocked that I had relinquished my peace, my poise, and my power once again. And yet, when I went back to forgiveness and just being softer and wanting things for them that I wanted for me, I didn't have to do anything else. Everything else just aligned. And I think that's one of the greatest lessons. While the human mind wants and waits for the other person to change, the poison of unforgiveness is in us, and it's slowly doing us harm. And I think in 2015 language, forgiveness really means release. It's a release inside of us, not to the other person. We don't have to give up our power when we forgive, we take it back. Setting others free really sets us free, because resentment, anger, and hatred are all forms of attachment. Another quote I heard was, I will give no man power over me by forcing me to hate him. I really liked that. So I want to share with you a couple of quotes on forgiveness that I really like. This first one is from Yvonne Van Zant on the Oprah show. She said, until you learn to heal the wounds of your past, you will continue to bleed into your future. And then she goes on to say, don't be emotionally retarded or spiritually constipated. Dr. Deepak Chopra says that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Unforgiveness has that illusion that it will protect us, but it doesn't. And then I like, people need our forgiveness the most when we think they deserve it the least. And that's something I heard a long time ago, and I really liked. But the one that I think I like the most is by Bishop T.D. Jakes. He says, unforgiveness unchecked is like a cancer in our soul. It does not stay still. It infects other areas of our life and other relationships. As the cancer of unforgiveness spreads, it physically, emotionally, and spiritually changes who we are. Unforgiveness changes who you are at a cellular level. And by being trapped in our unforgiving past, we are sacrificing our present, empowering our history at the expense of our destiny. I just think that is so powerful. I was doing some counseling, I would say for a friend, but I have to tell you it's for a family member a few months ago. And This person is my age, and this person is lovely and incredible and wonderful and recently made their transition. And in working with them and their spouse and looking at things and being inside the family, I said, how do you think we find ourselves in this position? And after asking a better question and digging a little more, it was because of a lack of forgiveness. And so I would hope that we would all get to the point, including me, that no matter what perceived transgressions that have been out there, that we get to the point for forgiveness so that we can release. Because disease is dis-ease. You're out of harmony, either with yourself and your higher self or your head and your heart, but it's disease. And that's what cancer is. There's not necessarily a cure out there. There's things that can help us. But when I look at these things personally, it's what bounces between our ears all day long. That's what makes the difference to me. And I think that when we can forgive, don't forget, because if we forget, then we lose the lesson. We always want to remember, but we definitely want to forgive. So let me share another quote here with you from Viktor Frankl. He says, suffering ceases to exist when it discovers a purpose. So we got to find that purpose. A couple of years ago, my company got sued by a gentleman that filed a frivolous $1 million lawsuit against us. And it had no merit. And it was very difficult. It upset my dad so much that I even heard him say one day, I'm just so upset I can't see straight. And within a few months, he had cataract surgery. So we have to pay attention to what we say. Everybody in here, we do pay attention to our words. My dad didn't sleep very well. I mean, this was about an 18-month to 2-year process of this lawsuit that was going through. And it wasn't a whole lot of fun, but I had learned my lessons before. So I would get upset every once in a while, but I wouldn't give this person my power. In fact, every time I'd get upset, I would pray for him instead and his family. Now, mind you, this was all going on at a time that my mother had been bitten by a mosquito and had West Nile virus in 50 days flat on her back, and we thought she was going to die. I'm nursing Reverend RJ back to health after his open heart surgery. My daughter had been in the ER twice for a stomach problem that we finally took care of, and I was in the final stages of a divorce. So you just throw in a pickup truck, a train, and a dog, and you got a great country western song. So there's a lot of stuff going on in my life at this time. And my dad and my attorney thought I was just nuts that I would bless this guy. And everything that happened over the course of the 2 years, it just proved me out, or proved source out, I should say. And it all ended, everything, and it ended fantastic. But I didn't want to see it just that we got through it. I said, no, God, I want it to be better than it was before. I want the company to be even stronger. And you all heard me last month. I mean, about this time last year, I was looking around trying to figure out where our next job was going to be. And we've had the most wonderful year, highest revenue year that we've ever had, and we're only 8-9 months into the year. So it's better. The lawsuit went away, didn't have to pay anything. Not that it just went away. I didn't have $50,000 in attorney's fees. It went away. Didn't even have any of those things. But the last forgiveness technique, I talked about the 4T class or RJ's class on radical forgiveness by Colin Tipping. That is some serious, serious stuff. That's great forgiveness work. Is one, because I looked through my notes in here. I never gave a talk a few years ago on Ho'oponopono, which is the ancient Hawaiian forgiveness technique. And you're just saying this to yourself over and over. And the definition of Ho'oponopono is the process of letting go of toxic energies within you to allow the impact of the divine thoughts, words, and deeds and actions. Simply put, it means to make right or to rectify an error. You're getting back to a 0 point. There's a book by Joe Vitale called Zero Limits. And the 0 part is, they say, you're going within. Be still and know that I am. We've all heard that. So in this process, you're just going in and you're either going to live your life from memory or from inspiration. And the memory are all the memes that I talked about the last time I was here with Dr. Wayne Dyer. I'm not good enough, smart enough, strong enough, pretty enough, whatever. Those are memes. Those are those cultural things that get into our software and that we continue to run. So what we want to do is clean those. We want to get rid of those. So Dr. Hewlin is the guy that was studied by Joe Vitale. He said there's many ways to do that, but the easiest way, the way the ancient Hawaiian forgiveness technique talks about, is to say to yourself, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And you say that over and over to yourself, to the divinity within you. And I used to think, well, we're asking the divine source, God, to forgive us. And it's not so much that, it's really beyond that, because we're always forgiven. The shower of blessings, the way the universe treats us, it's always there. We're that rheostat I talked about. We're the ones that are kind of shutting it out a little bit. So if we would just get to the point where we could cleanse these things. And Dr. Hewlin took just as a quick reference for him, a mental ward at the state hospital in Hawaii, and he never met with a patient. All he did is look at their folder, their file, because he figured if it was in his experience that he caused it to some degree. He didn't kill anybody, he didn't do that, but as he's reading through this, he said, well, it's my responsibility, I better clean it. He never saw a patient. All he did was read their files. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, over and over and over again. They finally had to shut the place down. Everybody healed up and they had to get rid of them. They all went back into normal population. So I've been swimming now for about 3 years. And for the last 2 years, every time that I'm in the pool and I'm doing a stroke in the pool, it's, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. No matter whether I thought about the guy that had sued us, whether I was thinking about something else, and it's just cleansing the entire time. In her book called The Easiest Ways, Mabel Katz says, Ho'oponopono is a process of forgiveness, repentance, and transformation. We learn to take complete responsibility for our lives and realize that everything that appears in our experience is a projection of our programs. Dr. Hewlin says that the purpose of life is to be restored back to love, that 0 point, moment to moment. To fulfill this purpose, we must acknowledge that we are 100% responsible for creating the life that we have. It's not a whole lot of fun, but if we get real about it, that's what we got to do. We must come to see that it is our thoughts that create our life, and that the way it is moment to moment. The problems are not the people, places, or situations, but rather our thoughts of them. We must come to appreciate that there's no such thing as out there. It's always in here. We have to go inside, be still and know that I am, where the perfection is for everyone and everything that we think about. What is imperfect is the junk, the memories, the reactions that we replay as judgment, anger, and fear. So in doing this cleansing, this is what helps us out. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, over and over and over. So as we look for more peace and more poise and more power, I would just say to you, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, God bless you, and namaste.